What if I told you that a single Goan priest, armed with nothing except his faith, a rosary, and extraordinary courage, walked into a foreign land where priests were hunted, churches were destroyed, and Catholics were forced to worship in hiding? And that this one man, working alone in secret, helped revive the entire church of a nation, restored hope to thousands, and eventually became known as the Apostle of that country. This is the real life story of Saint Joseph Vaz, a priest from Goa, and how one Goan brought a nation back to faith. Joseph Vaz was born on 21st April 1651 in Benaulim, Goa, into a devout Catholic family. He was the third of 6 siblings, born to Christopher Vaz and Maria de Miranda. His father's family came from Sancoale, so he spent his early years between these 2 villages, one along the coast, the other along the river. From his childhood, he stood out. He learnt Portuguese in Sancoale and Latin in Benaulim, and his teachers noticed how fast he had progressed in his studies. He was serious, prayerful, and already drawn to a life close to God. As a young man, he went to Old Goa to study at the Jesuit College of St. Paul and then at the Dominican Academy of St. Thomas Aquinas, where he completed philosophy and theology. In 1676, he was ordained a priest for the Archdiocese of Goa. Soon after ordination, Joseph chose a very simple lifestyle. He began to walk barefoot like the poor, spent long hours in the confessional, and became known as a powerful preacher who lived what he preached. He also opened a Latin school in Sancoale to train young men for the priesthood, already thinking beyond himself and preparing others for the mission. The decisive moment of his life took place in Sancoale, inside the old church of Our Lady of Health, Nossa Senhora de Saúde. This was a magnificent Baroque structure built by the Jesuits in the 1600s and one of the most important churches in South Goa. It was here on 5th August 1677 that Father Joseph Vaz knelt before the altar and made his famous deed of bondage, a written act in which he called himself a slave of Mary and entrusted his entire life, mission, and future into the hands of the Blessed Mother. This was not just a prayer, it was a surrender, a turning point that shaped the rest of his life. He asked the Blessed Mother to lead him anywhere God desired, even into danger, even into lands where priests could be killed. This consecration became the spiritual foundation of everything he achieved afterwards. From that moment, his missionary life was marked by a strong Marian trust. When he later faced danger, arrest, disease, and persecution, this consecration at Sancoale was the inner foundation that kept him going. Today, the facade of the old Sancoale church and the shrine of Saint Joseph Vaz still stands as a reminder of that decision. The place where a young Goan priest handed over his life to Our Lady before handing it over to a nation in need. Before Ceylon, today Sri Lanka, Joseph Vaz first served as a missionary in Canara, today's coastal Karnataka. There, Catholic communities had been left without priests and many churches were in ruins. For about 3 years, he rebuilt churches, traveled from village to village, preached, heard confessions, and brought scattered Catholics back to the sacraments. These years in Canara trained him for hardship, long journeys on foot, simple food, and constant risk. They prepared him for the much more difficult mission ahead. At this time, Ceylon, today Sri Lanka, had fallen under the Dutch rule, The Dutch authorities were strict Calvinists and banned Catholicism. Catholic churches were confiscated and destroyed. Priests were expelled or threatened with death. It was illegal to offer Mass or sacraments. For many years, Catholics on the island had no priests. They kept the faith in secret, but they were starving spiritually. When Father Joseph Vaz heard about this, he felt strongly that God was calling him there. While others hesitated because it was dangerous, he volunteered. He first served as a superior of the Canara mission, but in 1686 he finally obtained permission to give up that post and travel towards Ceylon. In 1687, disguised as a poor labourer, he travelled via the coast, crossed to Tuticorin in Tamil Nadu, and from there to Ceylon. He reached the island in 1687. From the moment he landed, Father Joseph understood the risk. A Catholic priest discovered by the Dutch could be imprisoned or even executed. So he lived completely underground. He travelled mostly at night. He hid during the day. He located isolated Catholic families who had not seen a priest in decades. He celebrated Mass in huts, forests, and hidden houses. For many people, seeing him was an emotional moment. Some had not received the sacrament of confession or Holy Communion since childhood. Slowly and quietly, Father Joseph Vaz began to rebuild Catholic life in Ceylon, one village at a time. Eventually, Father Joseph Vaz made his way to the Kingdom of Kandy in the interior of the island, hoping to make it a safer base for his mission. But on his arrival, he was arrested as a suspected Portuguese spy and thrown into prison with his servant. Even in chains, he did what he always did. He prayed, lived simply, and served the other prisoners. His calmness impressed those around him, and the king slowly realized that this man was no spy, but a holy priest. During his time in Kandy, a severe drought struck. Crops failed, people suffered, and anxiety grew. Father Joseph Vaz prayed publicly for rain, and soon rain fell in abundance, particularly over the king's lands. This event had a huge impact. Many saw it as a clear sign of God's favor. The king's attitude changed. He began to protect Father Joseph Vaz and allowed him greater freedom. From that point on, Father Joseph Vaz could minister much more openly in Kandy and gradually across other regions, even though the Dutch hostility continued on the coasts. With greater freedom, Father Joseph Vaz threw himself fully into the mission. He traveled widely to serve hidden Catholic communities. He administered sacraments, blessed marriages, and baptized children who had waited for years. He rebuilt simple churches and organized catechists to continue teaching when he moved on. A particularly powerful moment in his life came during a smallpox epidemic in Kandy around 1679. While many abandoned the sick out of fear, Father Joseph Vaz and his companions personally cared for them. They carried food and medicine, washed their wounds, and looked after those that no one else would touch. This deepened the respect that even the Buddhists, Hindus, and non-Christians had for him. He was not just a preacher, he was a man who genuinely loved people in their suffering. Although he was never a bishop, Father Joseph Vaz effectively became the spiritual leader of the Catholic Church in Ceylon at that time. That's why in many paintings you see him with a bishop's mitre placed beside him. It's a symbol of spiritual authority and leadership, not his actual rank. Years of constant travel, fasting, and hard missionary work eventually weakened his body. By 1710, Father Joseph Vaz was often ill and very weak. But he continued to celebrate Mass and guide the priests who joined him. On 16th January 1711, in Kandy, he peacefully passed away after receiving the sacraments, entrusting his soul to God. He was about 59 years old. He was buried in Kandy, traditionally associated with the church then dedicated to Our Lady of the Conversion of Pagans, Nossa Senhora da Conversão dos Pagãos, in the Bogambara area. Today, Kandy remains recognized as his final resting place and shrine site for pilgrims in Sri Lanka. People of different religions mourned him. For many people in Sri Lanka, he wasn't a foreign priest, he was a father who had suffered with them. After his death, the miracles continued. For centuries, pilgrims have reported extraordinary graces at his tomb. The sick healed, families protected, and prayers answered in moments of desperation. One of the most well-known stories speaks of a dying child who suddenly recovered after the family prayed through Father Joseph Vaz's intercession and placed a relic near the child's bed. This healing was later submitted to the Vatican as part of the canonization evidence. Another testimony tells of a village near Kandy threatened by rising floodwaters. Families gathered and prayed to Father Joseph Vaz. And that night, the water stopped advancing and turned away, sparing the entire settlement. Over 300 years, countless Catholics and non-Catholics have reported being protected in accidents, healed from fevers, and helped during childbirth after invoking his name. His shrine in Kandy remains a place where people come seeking hope and where many return to thank him for the blessings received. His compassion did not end with his life, it continued through the miracles God worked through him. On 21st January 1995, Pope John Paul II beatified him in Colombo. On 14th January 2015, Pope Francis canonized him, officially declaring him Saint Joseph Vaz, the Apostle of Sri Lanka and a shining example for Asia. He is now recognized as patron of the Archdiocese of Goa and Damau, patron of Sri Lanka, and one of the greatest missionaries of the East. When looking at the life of Saint Joseph Vaz, it is easy to forget that he started as one simple village boy in Benaulim Sancoale. No title, no army, no wealth. Just a deep love for God, a total consecration to Our Lady at Sancoale, and a burning desire to serve people who had been forgotten. Through that, he rebuilt the church in Sri Lanka, strengthened the faith of thousands, and left a legacy that continues to inspire Goans and Sri Lankans even today. And that's how one Goan priest brought a nation back to the faith. Kandy in Sri Lanka is where Saint Joseph Vaz died and was buried. Today, pilgrims visit the area of his burial in Bogambara, linked to the old church, and a small shrine and chapel dedicated to him. Back in Goa, Sancoale is one of the most important pilgrimage sites associated with him. It holds the shrine of Saint Joseph Vaz, built near the facade of the old church where he wrote his deed of bondage to Our Lady. Hey guys, thank you so much for watching the video till the end. If this story inspired you, please like, comment, subscribe and share the video so that more people can discover the saints and stories of our beautiful Goa.